UFC Vegas 82 taking place this weekend at the Apex. It may not be the most stacked card name-wise, and not everybody's favorite fighters, but there are some sneaky good fights, ones that I think will be fun to watch for sure, like some bangers. And there are I want to say it's 3 prospects that I have quite an interest in taking a look at. One of them is because of the matchup, and the other 2 are just newcomers that I'm very interested in seeing. But we kick off the night in the flyweight division. Charles Johnson taking on Rafael Estevam. I guess I forgot about him. Make it 4 prospects. Rafael Estevam, I think, is a very good prospect. But taking on Charles Johnson, who is 32 years old, 13-5, 5'9", 70-inch reach, 2-3 in his last 5. And his last fight was unanimous decision loss, taking on Cody Durden in April of this year. And Estevam on the other side, 27 years old, 11-0 undefeated, 5'8", 69-inch reach, 5-0 in his last 5, obviously, he's undefeated, and he's got a win on Contender Series. That was his last fight. It was a round 2 KO TKO victory over Zhao Elias, and that was in September of last year. So it's been quite some time since we've seen him fight. He's been scheduled for a few fights. I think he was scheduled once versus Zhalgas Zhumagulov. I can't remember the other time he was scheduled, but he's had a few. I think, to be honest, his last fight, he didn't get in the cage because of weight issues, so that is a little concerning. He's a pretty big guy for flyweight. Like, he's got a lot of muscle on him. But for this one, it was an interesting one. I think Charles Johnson, there's so many fights where I think he could come out with the victory, but his takedown defense just isn't sharp enough. It's quite a good first line of takedown defense, but when he's continuously getting pressured, it's chain wrestlers. He tends to struggle with those. Obviously, we saw him get it done versus Zhalgas Zhumagulov. I cashed on that play, or on that win, that decision by the judges. I think it was the wrong one, still giving it to Charles Johnson. And my reasoning there was the takedown defense, and he's the much better striker, which if I was on the Charles Johnson side, that's what I'd be saying here. I think the first line of takedown defense is good, and if he can keep him off, he can use the jab and his kicks to keep range. Estevam doesn't have the best cardio, but from what we've seen in his last few fights, I'm not taking that route this time. I think Estevam, he's got the forward pressure, the athleticism, the strength, the explosiveness. I think he can go in there and kind of do what these wrestlers have been doing to him. Hold him up against the cage, get the takedowns after the first line of takedown defense, and grind on him. Just don't give him space. If you give Charles Johnson space to operate, that's where he gets his best work done. And I just don't think Rafael Estevam's going to give him that space to operate. I don't think he'll let him get into a rhythm. Even when he's tired in fights, we've seen him get tired towards the end of the second and in the third. And even in those rounds, he's still pressing for the takedowns. He's still trying to grind you up against the fence. And if he can get you down, he'll sit on top. His ground and pound is vicious. I love his ground and pound. He's got great elbows on the top. He absolutely blitzed Zhao Elias on the ground, crushed him with elbows. I got him out of there in the second round. And that's really the main thing here. I just don't think Charles is going to be able to keep him off. Obviously, the submission game is pretty decent for Estevam as well, but I think if he does get the finish inside the octagon, it'll be being relentless, getting that ground and pound. And on the feet, he's not a great striker, but if he can keep the pressure, like keep moving forward, keep Charles Johnson on his back foot, he's got pretty big power in his hands. Nothing, like I said, it's not very technical. It's not great striking, but the power is decent there. He'll throw big shots, and if he can use those to close distance, get inside, hold him up against the cage, get those takedowns. And I think Estevam gets his first win inside the octagon here. Lines I'm looking at, my mind initially went to Estevam 2-3, but the issue there is his cardio. I don't know I could definitely see the round 2 if he's quite dominant in the first. I don't know. So I'm quite close to playing the money line, but I'm not quite on it yet. I've still got a little convincing myself to do, to be honest, but I do think he wins this fight. I think most of the time he wins this fight, so I'm going with Estevam as the pick. I'm quite close to playing him. I probably will end up doing it, but the picks are always out there once I make them. Next up, we've got Trey Ogden taking on Nicholas Mata. This is one of my stronger opinions on the card, one of my favorite spots betting-wise for sure. I'm kind of surprised the line is this close. I get where they're coming from, but I don't totally agree with the reasoning, to be honest. Trey Ogden, 34 years old, 16-6, 5'11", 72-inch reach, 3-2 in his last 5, 1-2 in the UFC. His last fight was a unanimous decision loss, taking on Ignacio Bahamondes in April of this year. Nicholas Mata on the other side, 30 years old, 13-5, 5'9", 70-inch reach, 3-2 in his last 5 as well, with a win on Contender Series, and he's also 1-2 in the UFC. His last fight was a round 1 KO TKO loss versus Manuel Torres in June of this year. And I think against Manuel Torres, he looked very good up until he got knocked out. And again, it was quite quickly into the fight, a minute 50. But in that time, he was looking good up until he got knocked out. He ended up getting pushed back and caught with a sick counter elbow from Manuel Torres. He's a fantastic striker. And I think the big knock on Nicholas Mata, for the most part, is his chin. Obviously, he struggles when he gets hit to be able to. He got crushed by Jim Miller in his debut, and then obviously this Manuel Torres one. And Trey Ogden isn't that guy. He's not going to go out there and put Nicholas Mata out. Trey Ogden is a kick at range, jab at range, try and be lengthy, even though he's not super lengthy, and before the UFC, it was a lot of wrestling. We haven't seen too much wrestling in the UFC, which kind of surprises me. But I'm not a big Trey Ogden fan. I don't think he's that great. He got outstruck by Jordan Levitt, which is never a good sign. Striking, it's not what you want. Nicholas Mata on the other side, his boxing is very slick. He's got big power in his hands. He puts together great combos. And I don't think Trey Ogden is going to be able to keep him far enough off of him to where Nicholas Mata isn't doing damage. And Trey Ogden hasn't been knocked out, but I do think it's very possible with what Mata brings to the table. I think he's going to be landing a lot on Trey Ogden. I don't see anything Trey Ogden can do to stop Mata from being able to land his combos. I think his best option here, because if he's trying to do his typical jab at range, kick at range against Nicholas Mata, it's not going to work. His best option here is to try and get the wrestling going, but I just don't think he's a strong enough wrestler to get Nicholas Mata down and hold him down for long enough periods of time. I think I really like Nicholas Mata in this spot, whether he gets the decision win just piecing Trey Ogden up or whether he finds the finish. Personally, I already have a unit and a half on his money line. Lines I've been looking at are Mata KO, TKO plus 200, and then round 1 and round 2, respectively, are plus 400, plus 600. So I'm considering those. I think I'll sprinkle at least on the KO line, just because I think it's quite a possible option here. I just don't think Trey Ogden's quite up to the level. He's a hittable guy, as is Nicholas Mata, but again, unless we get some freak crazy Trey Ogden KO, I just don't see what he can do here to subdue Mata. So that's, like I said, this is one of my favorite spots on the card. I've already got the 1.5 laid, considering more on the knockout, maybe round 1, round 2. If it gets to round 3, maybe there's a possibility because Trey Ogden will really have to go for it that Mata can clip him. But if it gets that far, I think we probably see a decision out of Nicholas Mata. So I'm taking Mata here. Round 1, round 2 could be the KO, but I like him to get the win in general. And like I said, I've got the spot laid already. Next up, Lucy Pudilova taking on Eileen Perez. Pudilova, 29 years old, 14-8, 5'8", 67.5-inch reach, 3-2 in her last 5. Currently, the first 1-1 that you see next to her 3-2 is her current UFC stint. She's 1-1 right now in this UFC stint. She had another previously, and then she got cut and did some work and got brought back for this stint. In her first stint, she went 2-5. Her last fight was a split decision loss to Jocelyn Edwards that there's a good chance she probably won that fight. Again, this is another one where, like the Charles Johnson, Magulov one, I took Lucy Pudilova in that one. And I don't want to say I was gifted a decision, but I feel maybe a bit lucky to have it. Perez on the other side, 29 years old, 8-2, 5'5", 66-inch reach, 3-2 in her last 5. Did I say 8-2 in her last? I don't know why. 8-2, 5'5", 66.5-inch reach, 3-2 in her last 5, 1-1 in the UFC, and her last fight was a unanimous decision over Ashley Evans Smith back in July of this year. I don't have too much to say on this one. I didn't I didn't really go too deep into it. I watched a couple fights for each of them and kind of tapped out on it just because I'm not super interested in betting this one. I do think Eileen Perez is going to win, though. I think on the feet, I think she hits a bit harder. I like Pudilova's straight shots. She's definitely going to be able to hit Eileen with those, but I think maybe Eileen's strikes will have a bit more behind them, and neither of them have great striking defense. And then when it gets to the ground game, we've seen Lucy Pudilova get held down before. I don't think Eileen Perez is super high level, but I think she's going to be strong enough in this matchup and like relentless enough to be able to get the takedowns and be on top, get some ground and pound off. I just think she's like I always say gritty and grimy. I don't mean like grimy in a weird, gross way. I just like in the octagon they're gritty and they get after it. I think Eileen Perez is a little bit grittier, a little bit like she's willing to go. I don't know. It feels like she's meaner in there, and I think that gets her the win here. I think like the strikes will be a bit better, power wise, damaging wise, and on the ground, like I said, I think she's stronger. I think she'll be able to get the takedowns, get some ground and pound off. I don't know if we see a finish here. Like I said, I'm not overly invested in this one, but I do think Eileen Perez is going to be the pick, so that's my pick there. No betting for me for sure from this fight. Jekka Sargi taking on Lucas Alexander in the next one, a featherweight bout. I almost said flyweight. It's featherweight. This is a weird one for me in terms of, I'll read the stats in a second, but in terms of I do think Lucas Alexander is the better striker, the more technical. He should be able to get this one done. But with the variance and the wildness Jekka brings, I think the line is far too big, and like you shouldn't feel safe throwing Lucas Alexander in parlays. I think most likely he gets the win, but just with how Jekka fights, I think there's a chance he finds the big shot. But Jekka, 28 years old, 13-3, 5'8", 69-inch reach, 4-1 in his last 5, 0-1 in the UFC. That was his road to the UFC finale, taking on Anshul Jubli, who we just saw lose to Mike Breeden. He got round 2 TKO'd by Anshul Jubli for a loss back in February. Lucas Alexander on the other side, 28 years old, 8-3, 5'11", 73-inch reach, 4-1 in the UFC. 4-1 in his last 5 as well, 1-1 in the UFC, and his last fight was a unanimous decision victory over Steven Peterson in March. So neither of them have fought super recently, definitely towards the beginning of the year. But to go back to what I was saying before I read out the stats, Lucas Alexander, great kicks. He's a very technical, precise, like he's trying to be very accurate, pick his counters, keep you at range with the kicks, pick you apart with the kicks. He had a great finish over, I believe it's Jacob Kilburn. I can never remember if it's Jason or Jacob Kilburn. But he was relentless with the kicks, throwing them to all 3 levels. He does very well at all 3 levels, and one of the kicks ended up breaking Kilburn's arm. They had to wave the fight off. And Jekka on the other side, completely opposite. He's a wild man. He's not precise. He rushes in. He throws big shots. All his power is behind every single shot he throws. He mixes in takedowns sometimes, but he's not a very good grappler. It's just to kind of have variance in his game, I'm assuming, mix stuff in. He can get the takedowns because he's relatively strong, but he's not the best grappler in general. And I don't really think that comes to play here. I think this will definitely be a striking match. And with Jekka on the feet, I worry for, like, if people are betting Lucas Alexander at minus 510, I worry that Jekka rushes in and finds something crazy. Because although I do think Alexander is probably a step ahead of Sargi in the striking department pretty much everywhere, the one spot he's not is the power and the wildness. So if Jekka can continuously push Lucas Alexander back, maybe he's able to find a big shot rushing in, or if Lucas gets a little sloppy because he's picking Jekka apart and Jekka's able to find a huge counter, maybe that's live. I do think that is his win condition. He needs to find the finish. If he's going tit for tat with Lucas Alexander over 3 rounds, he's gonna lose. So I think 70% of the time Lucas Alexander wins this one, but I would not be confident in laying the minus 510 because I do think the knockout is there. With that being said, I'm still picking Lucas Alexander. Like I said, if it goes to plan, he should win this fight 7 out of 10 times. A few of those getting clipped, so I'm going with him. Now, I'm not mad. There are people on Twitter I've seen. I'm not mad at them taking the money line shot on Jekka just because he should probably be, like, Lucas Alexander should probably be like a minus 200 favorite. And I guess that is because people have bet him up, but it's still a little crazy to me. So I'm not mad at the people putting a little bit on Jekka moneyline or Jekka KO, just because it's sitting at plus 700 right now, the KO line. And like I said, I do think that's his win condition to win. I talked about this one far too much for what it is, but Lucas Alexander is the pick. Be mindful not touching this one betting wise. Next up, Mick Parkin taking on Kyle Machado. We've got the big fellas throwing down. Mick Parkin's 28 years old, 7-0, 6'4", 79-inch reach, 5-0. Obviously, he's undefeated with a win on Contender Series, and he's 1-0 in the UFC. His last fight was a unanimous decision win over Jamal Pogues back in July in London. Kyle Machado on the other side, 29 years old, 8-1-1, 6'4", 78-inch reach, 5-0 in his last 5 with a win on Contender Series. His last fight was that Contender Series win. It was a unanimous decision victory over Kevin Saflarski, and that was in August of this year, episode 1 of this most recent season of Dana White's Contender Series. And I just don't think Machado's very good. Obviously, he's a big guy. He swings a little bit wild. He's got decent power in his hands. His last fight against Kevin Saflarski, he just pushed him and held him up against the cage for basically 15 minutes and somehow still got the contract, even though it was possibly the worst fight in Contender Series history. And Mick Parkin's on the other side. I think he's a level above Kyle Machado pretty much everywhere. I think he'll have the clinch advantage. We've seen him do well on top with takedowns. Obviously, he's a very slick boxer. His boxing combos are great. And I just think anywhere this fight goes, he's going to be able to beat Machado. On the feet, obviously, he has the boxing advantage here. He's going to be able to piece Kyle Machado up with straight punches, with big shots if he takes them. I think he has him covered everywhere there. If Machado goes for his game plan of trying to hold Mick Parkin up against the fence, I think Mick Parkin's got him covered in the clinch. I think he can do that there. And if Machado goes for takedowns, which obviously he didn't in his last fight, because these are just Contender Series stats. They're not his whole career. It's just what he's done with the UFC. He didn't go for any there. I don't think he'll be able to get Parkins down, to be honest. I like Mick Parkin in this one. I don't know if he finds the finish. I think there's a pretty good chance he does, but I think if Mick Parkins doesn't win this fight, he's got issues. He definitely should win this fight. So Mick Parkins is the pick here. This was another one. He should cook here. Taking place in the middleweight division, we have Christian Leroy Duncan taking on short notice replacement for Cesar Almeida, Dennis Tululin. This is another one I don't have too much to say. This one feels pretty straightforward to me. Christian Leroy Duncan, 28 years old, 8-1, 6'2", 79-inch reach, 4-1 in the UFC, or in his last 5, 1-1 in the UFC. His last fight was unanimous decision loss versus Armin Petrosyan back in June, and in his debut fight, the one win he has in the UFC, he took on Dusko Todorovic, and we really didn't get to see much. Dusko hurt his knee quite early in the first round, so we didn't really get to see that one play out. And Dennis Tululin on the other side, 35 years old, 10-8 in the 10-8. Why do I keep saying in the UFC? 10-8, 6'1", 77-inch reach, 2-3 in his last 5, 1-3 in the UFC. His last fight was a round 1 TKO loss to Gregory Rodriguez back in August. So this one, he got grounded out pretty brutally. He was taking shots while he was obviously out. So this one feels a bit soon to me. But I also think, unless his contract was longer and this is just finishing out his contract, I find it hard to believe Dennis Tululin would have gotten another UFC fight if he hadn't taken this on short notice or just taken whatever opportunity he could find. Christian Leroy Duncan is the much more technical striker here. I think he's going to pick Tululin apart, and unless Tululin lands some big one-punch knockout, I have a hard time seeing how he gets this one done. He's not the best grappler. We haven't seen him grapple in the UFC, to be honest, but I think Christian Leroy Duncan has that advantage over Dennis Tululin here, too. If he wants to take this to the ground, I think he can. I think he's kind of just got Dennis Tululin covered everywhere. I don't think Dennis Tululin's very good. Like I said, I think this is him getting another UFC fight because he's taking a short notice opportunity to keep CLD on the card. So I'm going Christian Leroy Duncan here. No bets at all for this one from me. I'm not touching this. Next up, a much more interesting fight than the last. Chad and Helliger taking on Jose Johnson, and Helliger is 36 years old, 12-6, 5'6", 64-inch reach, 4-1 in his last 5 with a win on Contender Series, and he's 1-1 in the UFC. His last fight, a unanimous decision loss, taking on Alatong Lee back in September of 2022. So it's been quite some time since we've seen him fight last. Jose Johnson on the other side, 28 years old, 15'8", 6 feet tall, 71-inch reach, 3-2 in his last 5 with a win on Contender Series, and he's 0-1 in the UFC. His solo loss in the UFC was his last fight. It was a round 1 submission loss versus Damon Blackshear. He got put in a twister, which is pretty crazy. You don't see that often. But that was back in August. I think in this one, Jose Johnson should get the win here. Chad and Helliger, he's very gritty. He's one of those guys, again, I would say like gritty, grimy, tough in the octagon. Hard to get off of you. He's going to keep coming forward even when he's taking shots. I think he's a decent striker, but it's nothing overly special. And he's overcoming a huge, huge reach disadvantage here. And Jose Johnson is quite a good striker. I think he's the more dangerous fighter. Chad and Helliger may try and go to the ground here just because we've seen Jose Johnson have a lot of trouble with ground fighters, even though on Helliger I wouldn't consider him a grappler himself. He may try and work that in. To be honest, I don't think he's a good enough grappler to be able to work it in, to hold Jose Johnson down long enough for it to mean anything. I don't think he's got the submission game to put Jose Johnson out, even though they both have more submission losses than wins. I kind of, in a pure grappling sense, I kind of edge on the side of Jose Johnson, which is weird to say, but it just feels like that for me. The under is looking nice in this fight. I think both guys have finishing potential, but I think it's much less likely from Chad and Helliger. I like Jose Johnson in this spot quite a bit. I think he's got the tools to do it. He's so long. I think Helliger's going to have a lot of trouble getting inside on him. And like I said, Jose Johnson, I keep saying Jose Johnson just keeps having, or Jose Johnson is going to have a lot of success at range here, I believe. Like I said, he's the much more dangerous striker. It feels like there's pop in his shots that Helliger just doesn't have. He hurt his Contender Series opponent with a knee, if I'm not mistaken. So it wasn't even like a big punch that hurt him. And I don't know why, but with the thinking that I kind of explained of Jose Johnson's had a lot of trouble with grapplers in the past, even though Helliger's not a grappler, maybe he'll go out and try and get some takedowns. That Jose Johnson sub plus 600 line, it's kind of sitting there staring at me. It's calling me. And with a guy being, I think he has 2 submission wins and 5 submission losses, and Helliger has 3 wins and 5 losses submission-wise. I don't know. It shouldn't be calling me, but it is. I feel like and again, Jose Johnson has never had a guillotine in a professional fight, but there's something telling me it could be live here. Regardless, I think Jose Johnson gets this win. Like I said, I think the distance control and the striking prowess of Jose Johnson is just going to be a bit too much for Helliger. But for some reason, the world's telling me to sprinkle a bit on Jose Johnson sub plus 600. So I'm going to be doing that just because I've got this weird feeling. But I think the most likely outcome we see is a Jose Johnson knockout. Or if somehow this gets to the distance, I could see Jose Johnson just doing more, winning a decision that way. So Johnson's the pick. And that sub line's calling me. So there may be a little sprinkle on that sub line. Next up, JSP Jonathan Pierce taking on Joe Anderson Brito. Featherweight bout. This is one of the fights that is not sneaky good. If you are a UFC guy, you know this fight's going to be sick. Jonathan Pierce, 31 years old, 14-4, 6 feet tall, 71-inch reach, 5-0 in his last 5. His last fight was a unanimous decision win over Darren Elkins in December of last year, so we're closing in on a year since we've seen him fight. Obviously, we won't get there because he's fighting this weekend. But just about 11 months since he's last fought. Joe Anderson Brito on the other side, 28 years old, 15-3-1, 5'8", 72-inch reach, 4-1 in his last 5 with a win on Contender Series, and he's 3-1 in the UFC. And his last fight was a round 1 KO TKO win over Weston Wilson in July of this year. And obviously, Weston Wilson was not up to the level of Joe Anderson Brito. Also, I think on short notice he was given Lucas Alexander one time. That was, 2 of his wins don't seem great to me in the UFC. Um, and this is a very, very interesting fight to me because I've gone back and forth. I've felt good for both sides a little bit. I think we know what Jonathan Pierce is going to bring. I don't want to say he's fallen in love with the striking, but he's been striking recently a bit more than he typically does. Obviously, against Darren Elkins, he could get away with that. I don't think he'll be able to get away with that against Joanderson Brito. He's got to bring the wrestling quickly. I think he will. On the feet, he's very hittable. Joe Anderson has ridiculous power in his hands. He might not be the most technical striker, but he's a good striker. And you don't always need to be technical to be effective, and that's kind of where he is. He may not be the most technical, but his striking is quite effective. And we know his submission game is fantastic as well. JSP has been caught in a few guillotines at times where he's been able to escape them. So it'll be very interesting there to see if he gets his neck stuck in a guillotine, if he can get out, if Brito can cinch it up, what happens there. But the issue I have on the Brito side is I think he's probably got one round of juice in him with the pace Pierce brings, because obviously Pierce is still going to be fighting here. He's not going to be like a sitting duck in round one. He's still going to be fighting back, bringing his pace that we know he brings. And I just don't know if Joe Anderson Brito has the pace to match that, the gas tank to match that. So if he can't get the first round finish, I have a hard time seeing him getting the win here. Maybe early second round is live as well, but I think Joe Anderson Brito probably needs a first round finish unless he's like clipping Pierce in each round, but Pierce is able to survive, so Brito's winning rounds like that. I just don't see it though. I think what likely happens is Pierce has to weather an early storm, and if he can, he's going to bring his pace, he's going to bring the grappling, he's going to bring his forward pressure, and I think that's really going to put a strain on Brito's gas tank. So I like Pierce here. I think, like I said, I think he weathers that early storm, and even though Brito's a good grappler himself, once he gets tired, the dude looks heavy. So I think once Pierce is able to start to break him down in that second and third round and really get the wrestling going, because maybe he's not able to get the takedowns early in the first, but he'll be pressing the action. He'll be pushing for those takedowns. He'll keep the pace high, and I think that's where he can make Brito fold. So round 2, round 3 seems very good for. It's kind of a weird fight because I don't want to, like, the money lines. Like I think they're right. Like, Jonathan Pierce should be a small favorite, but with the danger Brito brings in the first round, just a small underdog. So it kind of feels weird to bet on the money line here. I do think. God, the more I talk about it, the more I'm convinced in Pierce here, because I've been thinking about it and watching tape all week, obviously. But the more I talk about it out loud, it kind of makes me favor Pierce even more. Brito, if you're on the Brito side, round 1 knockout sitting at plus 400, or not knockout, it's just round 1. So Brito round 1 sitting at plus 400 isn't a bad shout, and I'm probably gonna have a small sprinkle on each of Pierce round 2, Pierce round 3, and maybe Pierce round 3 decision, just in case. Another good bet if you're on the Brito side is Brito scorecards no action, because maybe he does win on the scorecards. I just think it is super, super unlikely, so you're probably pretty safe playing that because, well, actually, I don't know, because with the gas tank, maybe Pierce finds the late finish. If you're on the Brito side and you think Jonathan Pierce needs to get this to decision to win the fight, then that seems like a good bet. I've seen a few people play it, on Twitter, not like it's not like a play of the week type deal, but I've seen a few guys play it. But I'm siding with Pierce here, although I do think Brito 100% can find the finish. It is totally possible. I think Pierce is going to be able to weather that storm, push his pace, and even if he's not able to get takedowns early, I think they will come in time as Brito starts to tire and JSP doesn't. So I'm going with JSP. The more I talk about it, I'm getting quite close to putting a bit on the money line. It sounds like sometimes when I talk about stuff out loud, it makes me think more, and that's one of those. So I'll be doing that. I'll have a little bit on round 2, round 3 indecision, and maybe just round 3. But I like Pierce in this one a lot. I think he finds the late finish or gets the decision win. Next up, a very interesting one. Uros Medic taking on short notice replacement for Johnny Parsons in, I think it's Miktabek Oralbay. He's from Kyrgyzstan, newcomer. He just had a ridiculous knockout in LFA, you could see it there, October 27th, so not long ago at all. That knockout was sick. If you haven't seen it, just go take a look at the clip of the knockout. It's awesome. Uros Medic, 30 years old, 9-1, 6'1", 71-inch reach, 4-1 in his last 5 with a win on Contender Series, and he's 3-1 in the UFC. He's actually had a pretty decent UFC run here, with his last fight being a round 3 KO TKO victory over Matthew Semmelsberger, which is no easy task, and he was able to pass that task. Not getting taken down as well, which is quite impressive, and that was back in July of this year. Miktebek Oralbai, I believe that's how you pronounce it, or at least that's how I read it. 25 years old, 11-1-1, 5'10". I didn't see any reach stats. He's 5-0 in his last 5, and this is his UFC debut. His last fight was that crazy knockout I was talking about. Round 2 KO TKO win over Charles Hayward. Obviously not the greatest opponent, but still a sick knockout nonetheless back in October. And I want to pick Miktebek here. He's got the grappling. If you've watched him fight before, he's had some pretty good grappling performances in LFA and outside of LFA, but it seems like I should mention this before I forget, he's got the pace and the cardio to back it, so he can go 3 rounds. We've seen him do it a few times. He has a lot of finishes, but we have seen him go the distance and dominate. But it seems in his last 2 fights, he's kind of fell in love with the striking, and I don't know if he was doing that against maybe lesser opponents to just show that he has that ability, but if he's fallen in love with the hands that much and he wants to go out here and strike versus Uros Medic, he's probably going to get knocked out. We've seen him take some big shots, and roll with them, eat them well. Not roll with them. He's not rolling with the shots. He's eating them, and it's against lesser opponents. So I wonder if that has something to do with him being able to take them as well as he has. He's very hittable on the feet, but the grappling is obviously where he shines. His striking is, I would say, like it's decent for a primary grappler. His jab is pretty heavy. Obviously, you can tell he's got power on the feet when he strikes. It's not the most technical. He's not really like out there putting together great combos, but he's a decent striker. He's not a bad striker by any means. But the grappling is definitely where he shines. He's got solid ground and pound when he's on top. He's got a few submissions on his record as well. And I think if he goes out there and tries to strike with Medic, he probably gets finished. That's not a good idea. Medic is a very, very dangerous striker on the feet. His kickboxing prowess is sick. I love watching him strike. But if he goes out here and grapples, I think there's a chance he gets the victory. I'm siding with the newcomer in Miktebek, but I'm worried about it being short notice. I'm worried about him kind of falling in love with the hands. Maybe he goes that way. I think in his UFC debut against a guy who's a striker on short notice, he will probably know to go out there and grapple. Obviously, that's his mainstay in his game. And Uros Medic has had some quality takedown defense, 80%. He stuffed both the ones Matt Semmelsberger took, but I do always wonder with the guys with good takedown defense, when they haven't come up against a chain grappler, somebody that's going to continue to press the issue, I always wonder if they'll fold in that situation. So it'll be very interesting to see here. I kind of want to bet Miktebek, but just with the unknown and it being short notice, I will probably end up staying away from it. But I am going to go with my gut feeling here and pick Miktebek Oralbai to get the win in this fight over Uros Medic, which, I don't know, could end up not working out, picking the short notice guy with a little bit of an unknown, but I think he definitely has the tools to go out here and beat Medic, and if he uses them correctly and the short notice doesn't affect his gas tank too much, I think he should be good here. So I'm picking Oralbai to go out there and grapple to a victory. Next up, Luana Pinheiro taking on Amanda Ribas. Pinheiro, 30 years old, 11-1, 5'2", 62.5-inch reach, 5-0 in her last 5 with a win on Contender Series and 3-0 in the UFC. Her last fight was a split decision victory over Michelle Waterson-Gomez back in April. Amanda Ribas on the other side, 30 years old, 11-4, 5'3", 66.5-inch reach, 2-3 in her last 5, and her last fight was a round 2 KO TKO loss to Macy Barber back in June of this year. She's coming back down to strawweight. She went up to 125 to test her luck there. If I'm not mistaken, she got 1 win and then lost in her second attempt. I could be wrong, I don't have it in front of me, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened. In this fight, it's a weird one. So Luana Pinheiro is a total moments fighter. Obviously, if she's not fighting the highest of level, she may be able to go out there and dominate, but it feels like she's a finisher / moments fighter. And against Amanda Ribas, I do think the moments are possible to find. Amanda Ribas, if she had a really good chin and didn't fall to big shots, because she's gotten dropped a lot recently. So if that wasn't the case, I would probably pick her quite confidently here. I think she would go out there and win the minutes for sure. I think she's the better grappler, even though Pinheiro has a judo black belt. I think Ribas, her takedowns are decent enough to where she'll be able to get Pinheiro down. I don't know if she'll be able to hold her down, but maybe she can win some minutes up against the fence. And with the striking, I think she'll put out more volume. I think she'll probably land a bit more than Pinheiro, but my worry is she's very hittable, Ribas is, and when she does get hit by Pinheiro, can she not go down? Can she compose herself? If she does get clipped, can she come back from it? And I just don't know. I think the longer this fight goes, the more it suits Amanda Ribas if she's able to not take the big shots and get finished by them early, or if she's able to kind of take those big shots and recover and get back into the fight. I think the longer it goes, the more it suits her. She'll be the minute winner here, in my opinion. Like I said, Luana Pinheiro seems to be a moment/finisher fighter. I just think those moments are live here. So I do think Ribas probably wins this fight most of the time. Like if you simulated this, I always say like she wins it at a high clip. I'd feel like Ribas would win this fight probably 6 out of 10 times. But in all those times, I'd be worried about her getting clipped, and I do think it is very possible. There's a 4 out of 10 chance there that I think Luana Pinheiro gets the knockout, and that's almost 50%. So the minus 230 is a little scary. I understand people playing it because if she didn't have the chin issues, like she should be able to win this fight. I don't want to say quite easily, but like if she didn't have those chin issues, she would breeze this fight, in my opinion. But with those chin issues, I don't mind taking a shot at Luana Pinheiro here. I may end up taking a small shot at the money line, because if she's able to clip her in a couple rounds and steal 2 of those rounds, even after losing most of them, I think it's possible she walks out of there with a decision victory. And I also think it is quite possible that she walks out of there with a finish. If she's able to hurt Amanda Ribas and get her down on the ground and get off some good ground and pound, there's a chance. So my gut is telling, my brain is telling me to pick Amanda Ribas here, but my gut tells me Luana lands the big shot, because she was landing big shots against Michelle Waterson. Michelle's very durable, much more durable than Amanda Ribas, in my opinion. I'm not going to talk myself out of it. I'm picking the underdog in this one. I don't know how many underdogs I've picked so far. Normally I keep track of that, but I'm going with the underdog, and this one is my pick. I think Luana Pinheiro finds that moment that I've been talking about that she needs. And maybe it's a couple moments to win a decision, or maybe it's one moment and she's able to finish Ribas. But the line's speaking to me, and I think it's totally possible that she finds the big shot. I don't see how she doesn't land on a Ribas during the course of this fight at some point. So I'm going with Pinheiro to find the win here, as the underdog. Next up, a very interesting one of the prospects I was speaking of, Peyton Talbot, fresh off of a great Contender Series performance against Reyes Cortez, who is Tracy Cortez's younger brother, if I'm not mistaken. Taking on Nick Aguirre. I don't know quite how to say it, but Peyton Talbot, 25 years old, undefeated, 6-0, 5'10", 70-inch reach. Obviously, his last 5 is 5-0 as he's undefeated with a win on Contender Series. And like I said, that last fight was a unanimous decision victory over Reyes Cortez on episode 1 of Contender Series this year back in August. Nick Aguirre on the other side, 27 years old, 7-1 as his record, 5'9", 74-inch reach, 4-1 in his last 5, 0-1 in the UFC. He got ragdolled by Dan Argueta. It wasn't like a brutal fight or anything, but Dan Argueta was just able to hold him down. He barely threw any strikes. You can see he's averaging less than a significant strike per minute, which is never a good sign. I don't think he's that good. I don't think obviously his grappling is quite good, but I just don't think as an all-around mixed martial artist he's got the goods to be in the UFC. This is, I don't want to say like a feeder fight for Peyton Talbot, but they're definitely setting him up for success here with this one. I think unless Nick can get him to the ground early and finish him very early with a submission, I don't think he has any success here. I think for the most part, Peyton Talbot shucks off the takedowns, and he is the much, much better striker on the feet. The pressure will continue to build. Peyton Talbot's got a great gas tank. He's always coming forward. It's a lot of volume. And I just think that's going to break Nick Aguirre, whether he finds like a big punch knockout or it's the pure volume of Peyton Talbot, the pure pressure coming forward. Nick Aguirre's tired. He couldn't get the wrestling, or he couldn't get the grappling going. Does Peyton Talbot break him? Does he find the big shot? I don't know. I do think he finishes him, though. Did I write down any lines for this one? Talbot KO round 2 plus 325. Talbot round 3 KO plus 550. If you're going to bet this fight, the minus 800 is crazy. Like, he probably wins this fight, so, like, you should be safe throwing a minus 800 into a parlay, but I never, ever recommend that. We've seen people get burned numerous times. It happens in Bellator Weekly if people bet on Bellator. And, like, for example, Valentina Shevchenko being like a minus 600 over Grasso. It happens all the time. These big favorites lose. I don't see it here, but I also am not putting money on minus 800. If you are going to, pick a finish line. Like, maybe it goes the distance, but I don't see it. I will probably be sprinkling on the round 3 plus 550. That line seems pretty good. I also may take a shot at the plus 325 in round 2, just so I don't miss out on that, because I do feel like there's a pretty good chance he could get him out of there in round 2 as well. But yeah, if you're gonna play Peyton Talbot, please play a finish line or stay away. There's no point in taking this minus 800. We've seen people get burned by it before. Next up, if you couldn't tell, Peyton Talbot's the pick. Next up, Chase Hooper taking on Jordan Leavitt. This is a weird one. I've been on both sides this week. And the side I've ended on I'm happy with. But Chase Hooper, 24 years old, 12-3-1, 6'1", 74-inch reach, 3-2 in his last 5. His last fight was a unanimous decision over Nick Fiore back in May of this year. Jordan Leavitt, 28 years old, 11-2, 5'9", 71-inch reach, 3-2 in his last 5 as well. His last fight was a round 1 KO/TKO victory over Victor Martinez in February of this year. So been quite a while since we've seen Leavitt. Been like 6 months since we've seen Chase Hooper. And initially, I was on the Leavitt side. I think he's probably the better pure wrestler, and he's probably the more physically strong person here. And that should bode for being able to get takedowns and possibly holding Chase Hooper under him. That's kind of where I was early. I thought he'd be able to at least win the first 2 rounds via the grappling, or the wrestling advantage, I'd say, being the stronger person. But as you watch more tape and as you think about it more and you talk to people who know fighting, I've changed my opinion, and I'm actually quite happy, because I might have played the plus 170, and I don't hate people. I don't hate people. I don't hate the play that people are making on the plus 170, but just from kind of this different perspective I've gotten, I think it's probably not going to happen. Chase Hooper's scrambling, although he may not be the better wrestler here, his scrambling is fantastic. He's obviously got very good jiu-jitsu. I think it's going to be hard for Leavitt to control him for long periods of time. And as the fight goes, Leavitt is not a death gasser like we've seen dudes death gas before. He's not that. He does get tired, though, which his output slows down. He'll probably not be quite as strong in those wrestling situations. And on the feet, neither guy is a particularly good striker. Jordan Leavitt, it's kick and jab at range, try and keep you away from me. And Chase Hooper, it is full steam ahead, pressure. I'm throwing punches in bunches. And even though he may not be like the physically stronger guy, Chase Hooper seems to have more pop in his punches than Jordan Leavitt does. And I think that will be the difference here, because while we may see Jordan Leavitt be able to take advantage of his wrestling early, maybe. Like, I'm still not fully sold on it now. But that was my opinion before. So if that's able to be how the fight plays out, maybe he's able to win the first 2 rounds, but I just don't see it that way. I think he's going to have a hard time getting Chase Hooper down, which I mean, he could end up on top. I just don't see it. So I'm going with Chase Hooper here. I think he's going to be able to scramble out of bad situations on the ground and on the feet. I love his forward pressure. I think he can out-volume, outpace, out-pressure Jordan Leavitt when he starts to get tired. Maybe find a round 3 finish. I saw who was, I can't remember who he got the round 3 finish over. Was it Felipe Colares? He might have gotten that round 3 finish over Felipe Colares. I can't remember, but I saw a lot of people having the round 3 finish ticket on Chase Hooper, and I felt left out of it in that one, so I may play it here, round 3 plus 650, just to kind of take a little shot at this fight because I don't feel fully confident in Chase Hooper at minus 200, but I also don't love Jordan Leavitt as a dog here after kind of rethinking my stance. So, for the most part, I'm going to stay away from this unless I end up playing that round 3 sprinkle, which I may end up doing. But for the most part, like I said, stay away from this one. Next up, co-main event, Miles, and the pick is Chase Hooper. I keep forgetting to say who my pick is. The pick is Chase Hooper in this one. But next up, welterweight co-main event, we've got Michael Morales taking on Jake Matthews. Morales definitely getting a step up in competition. Max Griffin's not bad, but I do think he's getting a better striker here at least. Michael Morales, 24 years old, 15-0, 6 feet tall, 79-inch reach, 5-0 in his last 5 with a win on Contender Series, and he's 3-0 in the UFC. His last fight was a unanimous decision victory over Max Griffin in July of this year. Jake Matthews on the other side, 29 years old, 19-6, 5'11", 73-inch reach, 3-2 in his last 5. In his last fight was a round 2 submission victory over Darius Flowers, who came in on short notice. And that was also back in July of last year. I think Michael Morales probably wins this one. Maybe Jake Matthews is able to find his big shots. I don't think he'll have great success here on the ground. I think Michael Morales is going to be the physically stronger guy here, and he'll be able to shuck the takedowns off. Obviously, you can see his takedown defense has held up so far, 91%. And he's obviously going out there and getting a few of his own. I think that's there if he wants it. He may not be the better pure grappler, but I just think his strength and size in this one, he'll be able to outdo Jake Matthews in that sense. And then on the feet, I think he's the better counter striker. They both have decent power in their hands, but I like the technical aspect of Michael Morales a bit more than I do Jake Matthews. Again, this one feels pretty straight up to me. I just think Michael Morales hasn't beat everywhere. I'm not saying Jake Matthews can't get the win, because he's got solid striking and the punching power, and obviously his submission game is solid. I just don't know where those opportunities will present themselves for him in this fight, with Michael Morales being quite sound defensively, quite athletic. His movement's good. I think he's just a better all-rounder here, so I'm going with Michael Morales to get this win. From a betting perspective, I'm not touching this fight. I'm just going to sit back and watch it. This is one of the prospects I told you I was interested in beforehand. I think Michael Morales could have a very bright future here, so this is kind of just sitting back, waiting for him to get to the big guys, see what we can do there with the betting. But the pick's going to be Michael Morales. No betting here from me. This is a sit back and watch kind of fight. Main event. Now we have Brendan Allen taking on Paul Craig. This is a very interesting matchup. Paul Craig coming down from 205. This will be his second bout at middleweight. His last fight, he beat Andre Muniz. I don't think he's going to have the same success against Brendan Allen that he did Andre Muniz, though. Brendan Allen, 27 years old, 22-5 is his record. 6'2", 6'2", 75-inch reach, 5-0 in his last 5. And his last fight was a round 1 submission victory over Bruno Silva in June of this year. Paul Craig on the other side, the older man, 35 years old, 17, 6-1, 6'3", 76-inch reach, 3-2 in his last 5. And his last victory was that middleweight first fight in the UFC, a middleweight coming down from 205. It was a round 2 KO TKO victory over Andre Muniz back in July, back in UFC London. For this one, I think Brendan Allen is going to be a step above even where Andre Muniz was on the field. Like, we saw Brendan Allen beat Andre Muniz too, so no MMA math there, but I just think Brendan Allen on the feet, Paul Craig will not have the answers. I think he's got much better kicks. He's got much better Muay Thai in general than Paul Craig. That's kind of his style. He likes to lift that front leg and walk forward. Decent power in the shots. Obviously, they're big guys, so if someone connects, it's possible they go down. Paul Craig has good power on the feet. I'm not doubting or forgetting about that. I don't think he's quite got the striking prowess to be able to land something big on Brendan Allen here. He's going to be going in for those takedowns. Maybe he gets Brendan Allen down, but again, Brendan Allen's grappling is good enough to where I think he'll be able to get up, create separation, and get back to the striking. I think we probably see a finish here from Brendan Allen, whether it be a knockout or like a club and sub type deal where Brendan Allen's able to clip him on the feet and jump on him and find that submission. So Brendan Allen is definitely my pick here. I don't, like I said, again, I don't love the minus 405, so I'm probably not going to play, not probably, I'm definitely not going to play the money line, but two lines that I have been considering: Allen KO TKO plus 125, Allen sub plus 225. I should have written down the inside the distance line because I don't even know what it is off the top of my head. But I'll probably end up making a play somewhere in those three picks. If the inside the distance line for Brendan Allen is even plus 100, I will probably be taking it. I have a hard time seeing this fight get the distance going the distance for whoever wins, but I think Brendan Allen will be able to get it done on the feet here. He's just a much better striker than Paul Craig is, and his grappling is good enough to withstand Paul Craig's grappling, in my opinion. We get to the Savage Rounds parlay. We've had a rough last third of the year. We started off so good. We got up to nearly plus 10 units on just giving out one parlay a week, playing one unit on it a week. I was feeling pretty good there. We had a rough few months. That 4 losing streak, the 4-week losing streak with the Fiziev knee. There was another injury in there that ruined one of them one time. And it felt pretty unlucky on those 2 times. And last week, or the week before last, week 1, I felt pretty good. I do some lazy capping, going with Mackenzie Dern in that last fight. So that is, like I said, I totally own that one. But we've got to end the year strong. I've got to end the year strong. I've got to make much better picks. I feel pretty good about my Nicholas Mata pick. Like I said, I think on the feet, the boxing is slick. He's got the power advantage. If he's in close, he will be winning on the feet. I don't think Trey Ogden can knock him out, which is where his downfall has been. And I think his grappling is good enough, or his takedown defense is good enough to shuck Trey Ogden off. I don't think we've seen very good grappling from Trey Ogden in the UFC so far. And Mick Parkin is going to be my other leg of the Savage Rounds parlay for this week. It's big heavyweight dudes, and I just think Kyle Machado isn't UFC level. He swings big, and he held Saflarski up against the cage for a very long time. I think Mick Parkin's got him covered everywhere. He's the much better striker in terms of technical striking. He can match him in the power. In the clinch, he's not going to be able to hold Mick Parkin up against the cage the whole time. And he didn't shoot a takedown in his last fight. I doubt we see him shooting a takedown on Mick Parkin here. I think Mick Parkin's got him covered everywhere. I think there's a good chance we see 2 finishes for these guys. And we've got 4 cards left, this one included. I want to go 4 weeks in a row hitting the Savage Rounds parlay, just so we can at least get up to around plus 7 units. We can't end the year off sour. But that's it. UFC Vegas 282. Done and dusted. I guess not done and dusted yet, but we'll see this weekend. I will check back with you guys on Monday to see how we've done. We need to end the year off good for Savage Rounds, so I'll see you guys Monday to talk about it. Drop a like, subscribe. Peace.